Hey everybody, it's Kyle from Tavern TCG. Competitive mindset. I know, 2 weeks. You can tell it's been a long time because I have facial hair. Today we have a special guest, Stephanie Shaw. Hello.
Hi.
I wish I had a little applause noise so we could greet you effectively. You all know Stephanie, I'm sure. She's a huge name in Force of Will because she's one of the two level one judges we have in the USA. Is that correct? There's two or there's three
Yeah,
now?
it's me and Kent over.
Okay, there's two. And she also got second at Providence, which got her to Worlds, where she contended and played in the World Championship of Force of Will. So she's done a lot in this game in a short period of time. Most people, well, everyone loves Stephanie. That's the truth. She
I don't know if
knows
that's
it.
true, but
Yeah, it's definitely true. And,
all right.
and because she's the judge to the core, right? Like you were supposed to play at Nats, you judged instead because they needed help. Anyway, everything about judging, you talk to Stephanie about. She's awesome. She's really helpful. But today we're going to talk a little bit about judging later, but mostly, you've done a lot in the game, and I want to talk to you about competitive play here
Sure.
on the competitive mindset. All right, so the first thing I really wanted to talk to you about, and let's just start right off the bat, just to get people interested in what we speak about, which is like the reflect errata is just boom, it just happened, fresh. Just what do you think the impact that the errata on reflect is going to have just right out of the gates?
Um, to be honest with you, obviously we won't see it for a really long time
Right,
because Richmond and Pasadena are pre-errata, and
right,
the first tournament after is Dallas, which is the end of February.
right,
But to be honest with you, I honestly don't think it will change the percentage of players playing Reflect. I think that you may see a little bit less in terms of people playing more J ruler specific decks like Bahamut, Belgus, Kane, Valtina
right,
2.0. Um, but I think to be honest with you, almost everyone still will be playing Reflect. I think, in my opinion, it makes Orb more powerful. It makes, which also in turn makes Hera and Maribel more popular
right,
and remain powerful, just because of the relative advantage that an orb can give you. Since now, previously, if you had an orb on turn one and your opponent had Hera in their hand and you're on the play, you had 6 counters when they played the Hera, and they have 4. But now it would be that you have 4 counters and they have 2,
right,
and that's a much. You think about it as like, well, they're still only have 2 counters, but 4 counters versus 2, like the multiplication factor is very important.
right,
And especially if even if they want to, they could, instead of having when you play the Hera, instead of having the even putting on that 4th counter, what they could do is they could take 2 counters off and go to 1 counter, and all of a sudden they have an extra card
right.
off the thing, and they match up with you. So that means that even if you have the removal, the extra card you get off the Hera is replaced with
Right.
them getting off the orb too.
Yeah, it's a big deal. I think like because the one of the things that a lot of people talk about is winning the die roll, right? It's been very common in Force of Will where it's being on the play. There's no deck currently or in the past that wanted to go second, right? They
Exactly.
always want to go first. And the thing with Reflect being able to activate on both players' turns is you may be on the draw and lost the die roll, but you did get to gain a counter on their turn, and now you're going to gain a counter on your turn. You're going to filter twice. So it can help if your deck's built to play from behind. It can help you get to the cards that you need to do that.
Exactly.
Now, good luck, right? Because like you're saying, you have 2 counters, they have 4. That's a big deal when you're only gaining a counter on your own turn.
Exactly. And as you said, like when you're on the draw, you have an extra card, and then you have an extra filter.
Right.
And I think people, that really helps balance the die roll.
Right.
I know that Zach, actually lost quite a few coin or die rolls in the tournament, and
Right.
obviously he played second in the finals too, or he was on the draw in the finals. He still won. Like
Right.
I think that the errata, unfortunately, I mean, I don't want to say this because I do want people to at least give it a chance, and I personally will give it a chance too. But just speaking candidly, I do think that the errata actually makes the reflect problem worse. It may make reflect relative to other rulers worse, but in
Right.
terms of, but I don't think it weakens it enough to lose its dominant position. And
Yeah.
because it doesn't lose its dominant position, it then means that there's a problem in the reflect mirrors that
Yeah.
used to not exist because of the card advantage that you got going second.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely true. Like you see a huge it's a big problem when you're going second with reflect already, and now you're making that problem even worse. But on the flip side, what I think it will help with is the speed that the matches take.
Oh,
You're cutting down, you're cutting in half the amount of decisions that you have to make. That's a really big change.
yeah, that's true. And I should say from a judge standpoint, uh, having that sharp downgrade in the amount of time that a turn takes is actually a really good thing. Obviously, I personally witnessed at nationals. I personally witnessed a a game one draw.
Right.
Which it's the first time I've ever seen that enforceable.
Yeah, in most games.
Yeah, and I mean, like, sure, it was 50-minute rounds instead of 60.
Right.
But regionals also going to be 50 rounds, and that or 50-minute rounds.
Right.
So, you kind of have to adapt to that. But the nice thing is, with the short amount of time, you might see a lot more games finishing in time.
Right.
Even between the reflect mirrors, and honestly, or even like some of the games that would have been, like, I guess you might see more draws too, sure, because some of the games that would have been won on game one are now, or after game one, I should say, are going to finish in game three and have to be a draw.
Right. Yeah.
But those games would already be going to time, would already be going to turns.
Yeah.
And would already be taking up extra time at the end of the round. So those don't add any time, whereas the games that would have finished in game three that now are, the games that would have been a draw, I should say, that now have a winner in three are going to shorten the time drastically.
Yeah, which is huge because look, no one wants to lose game one right now, right before February. If you're playing before February 1st, worst case scenario in a tournament is you lose game one, right? Because it's possible you're not going to get to game three. It's not only possible; it's like actually kind of likely.
Yeah, it's pretty probable, and that's not to say that anyone's slow playing, because you don't have to slow play for games to take forever with reflect, and it's a huge problem. Like, obviously, I play too. And so when I do playtesting, it's just like it's so long to even playtest. Like,
How
I was
crazy is
playtesting
that,
for nationals with Ernest, Curtis Patton, and it just I was playing hyper aggro, and it still takes forever. And I would get into these stupid games like against like Six Ages or against Alice's World or something like that. Or even Valentina,
right?
Where it's just like you just have so many options that you have to go through, and so like even a lot of times I'd be really quick on my decisions, but even so, it took forever to playtest, and I can't even imagine some of the people who pick up Reflect and don't have the time to have that much playtesting and just pick it up and take it to a tournament or regionals, and then just play, and they're just without knowing, like, having that massive hours and hours and hours of playtesting, obviously they're going to have much slower decisions. And so even if you are really quick, even if you do know everything you want to do, even if you're like, okay, untap at the end of my, put the untap delay trigger at the end of my turn or something, really quick, or like +2/+2 to your creature or to your resonator end of turn if you don't want to filter, or something like that. A lot of people are going to think about it and be like, oh man, I don't want to filter. Maybe I shouldn't use this thing. And they don't even think, oh, my opponent has a resonator, I can target it.
Right.
They just think about it forever. And it's, eventually they'll be like, oh, maybe I won't use it or something. Right. And, but it takes forever. And so even if you're really quick, you could play somebody who's not quick. And they don't necessarily need to be slow playing for the match to take forever.
Right.
And even, as I said, I've seen people at the tournament who I knew from Worlds, or just knew from Tavern, or knew from wherever, who they were playing each other. It's not like they were playing people who weren't quick about it. And so they were quick people playing quick people, and their matches still weren't finishing.
Yeah. It's long. It's funny because like playtesting is now like a nightmare, right? Because you have
Oh,
like it takes forever. Like it was so funny. I was playing on Untap with Anton, right? And Anton and I are playing, and we finished one game, and we look at the clock, and 2.5 hours went by.
yep,
Now, obviously, you're playing online; it's going to take a little bit longer. But 2.5 hours, Anton had to go. Like we got like
yeah,
one game in. Stupid Alice's World versus the deck that Zach ended up, or similar version of the deck that Zach ended up bringing to Nats. It just took forever. It just took our whole lives, and so
yeah,
it's super funny now. Like playtesting is just a nightmare.
yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I remember, when I was playtesting, when I was helping Ernest prepare for Houston, and I was, obviously that was Baja Blast format,
Right,
but
right,
even so, like I was testing Alice's World against it, which
right.
takes longer.
Yeah, that takes a long time.
But you like it's very easy even in there to be like to get to a point where you're like, okay, one person is going to win.
Right, right.
They like unless you have like a god, and if there was like
Yeah,
a god draw that you could do to get out of it, we kept
yeah.
playing. But there would be points in time where there was nothing you could do, and
Mhm.
one person's going to win.
Right.
And whether it's the Baja Mirror or it's the Baja versus Alice World or whatever.
Exactly. Scoop it up.
And yeah, and you could just go right through all the matches.
Right.
Right. In this, you can't do that. You get to a point where both players stall.
Right.
Like stall out and just can't get damage through. And so then you're just getting this long, grindy game
Right.
where you're trying to figure out who's going to get the advantage first, who's going to draw into that removal of the other person's orb first,
Right.
so that they don't want to, like, especially here, like where they don't want to bounce it. So you're like, oh, well, now I'm getting a advantage slightly quicker than you are, and eventually I'm going to pull out this game.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of thing. Gosh, it's just. But even in that case, you're like, if they draw a Hera or something in the next 2 turns, they could maybe equalize it enough to where it's like, it's not going to be that hard. Or like if they draw a Gerta, for example, and then swing into your Hera, and then, it's just.
Yeah, it could be a nightmare, and that's why I think decks like Incarnate, like a straight Incarnate deck, yeah, it might be good, right? Like you could test it, and in 2.5 hours, it's going to be a great game one for you. The problem is like Incarnate is designed really grindy, right? You're just meant to grind, and that was like the whole idea. The thing is, with the Reflect the Weight stands today, you cannot afford to play a deck that grinds through all of game one, because if you lose game one, you might as well just go get lunch and scoop. Like you're not gonna win game two because you're not gonna finish it because your deck grinds.
You may not even finish game one.
Right? Yeah. Probably not. That's the biggest problem, because when you're looking at decks now, I think in this format, the biggest thing is you need to be able to play from behind. That's huge now, and it's difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really
Absolutely.
important. And the other thing is you need to make sure that you're playing a deck that's basic main strategy isn't not stalling, but like grinding out a game. Like that's what Incarnate's problem is, So those two things combined, like if you can figure out a way to play very, very well on the draw and a relatively quick match, you might be okay.
Yeah. But, obviously, as we're talking about, the errata is very good in that aspect in terms of making the life of the tournament organizer better.
Right.
It's way better.
Yeah.
We had rounds at nationals going 25-30 minutes past.
Yeah. Jeez.
And we talked to Jim, and Jim was kind of like, obviously is the main game that they play is Yu-Gi-Oh!
Right.
And for ARG, he was just like
blown away.
He just could not understand why these matches were taking forever to finish enforceable. And it's just kind of like you kind of have to be like, it's hard to really explain without explaining Reflect.
Yeah,
all of its intimate detail.
Yeah, it's challenging, and what's crazier about that is just the toll it puts on the player. Like you've played in a lot of events, and like just large ones. I know Worlds was a lot. Just the physical, like you just get tired.
Right? Oh yeah, I agree. I mean, even I will say, like, I had a really bad headache even after Providence, and that was like probably the least grindy deck I could have possibly played.
Right.
Sometimes it took like 45 minutes for 3 games because that's how Force of Will is.
Right.
But like, you're playing a deck that's literally just like, okay, ramp, destroy, destroy, pay or flip, combo off. Like, it's,
Right.
and even there, it's like, I'm getting headaches after, not eight rounds. I think it was a Swiss, and then like 3 rounds of thing, and you're talking about these regionals, which are going to have like 9 rounds of Swiss.
Yeah.
And top 8. Granted, the top 8 will at least be day 2 now, which makes it better.
Yeah, that does make it better.
But like you're talking 9 rounds where you're not only using the full amount of time, but you're also using time after it. Yeah. So there were in Providence, part of what made it nice was that you did actually have games. I had a game I played against Grimm where I 2-0'd Grimm really quick because they just did not have an answer to Mephistopheles' Spine of Gravity. There was no answer. So I 2-0'd them really quick and had 30 minutes, and I went to go get food from the concession stand.
It was wonderful.
Chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
And just relax. But you don't have that with Reflect Mirrors. No. You go through the tournament, you go through your whole match, you stay there for turns.
Yeah.
Then right after your turns end, all of a sudden it's like 5 to 10 minutes later, you have to be there for your next match. Right. You don't have time to go chill. Even if you're like talking to somebody, even if it does take a long time, you can't leave because you already went to turns, which means that it's already past your round time. You can't be like, oh, I've got 20 minutes left in the round, so I know that there's no way the next round's going to start before X o'clock,
right,
or whatever. And I agree with you. I just think I will be really happy about that. Even though I think that the imbalance in the meta will get worse,
right?
I am really happy in the respect that the time will finish quicker.
Yeah, that'll be good for sure. Now, what's it like right now judging during this really grindy Reflect meta? What's that like on the other side?
So what I will say is that the judge issue isn't that horrible. So the thing that people complain about when they complain about Reflect, they do complain about slow play. But as a judge, when I was in nationals, I got 1 slow play call. I got 1 slow play call and 1 stalling call.
Right.
The entire turn. So even if you're complaining about that, I'm not getting it. Right.
Raise your hand.
The major things were obviously trying to deal with venue times, which is more of a tournament organizer thing. But as a judge, you do have to,
pay attention.
Make sure that the players are playing quickly enough that you can finish in the venue time for the purposes of the tournament organizing. Right. And it wasn't as big of a deal with nationals, or even I guess with the regionals, because we now have day 2s.
Right.
Whereas before we had to have everything done by like midnight.
Yeah.
It's just, even in Providence, we ended up having to have a workaround where we were allowed to stay an extra hour if the only people allowed in were top 8.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal at Providence, but like, I mean, on that aspect, it's not that bad. The main thing that I have is the rules of Force of Will, and I was talking to one of my friends who's in L1 in Magic, and the rules in Force of Will allow for significantly more complicated decisions and interactions in Magic.
Right.
Which I know that a lot of Magic players might disagree with me on, but in my opinion, I agree with them. I think that Force of Will is a significantly more complicated game.
Right.
And so you have things like standbys, which, for the life of me, I try to help people understand them. But I understand that they're really complicated. It took me forever to fully understand them and to get all the rulings correct on all the timing and everything that they can do. And obviously, there's still things we're working on. I had to, talk to Italy about the issue with people holding things, because in the U.S., like, that's the thing that people do, and it's completely seen as normal. Like, if you have an advantage you can take, and it's a legal maneuver, then you do. Like, if somebody doesn't move past triggers, then you wait for them to make a move because you can rewind it, right?
Right.
So, we have complaints come in about it. So then I ask Italy, and Italy's like, well, if they're waiting, this should be prompt with a trigger, just like any other trigger. Like, if Rasputin dies, you don't wait 30 seconds for your opponent to make a move and say, oh, wait, I have to, my Rasputin has to die. Or the trigger has to die. So, it's kind of, I think, a disconnect there. Because even though Italy's extremely competitive scene, and while Japan's a little bit more casual terms of their players.
Right.
Both of them have kind of a very well, this is a kind of a fair thing to do. Like it's fair to be faster. It's fair to be
right.
Whereas in the U.S., it's kind of like
cutthroat.
Technically, yeah, it's more cutthroat. Exactly, more cutthroat, more competitive, more just technically it's legal kind of thing.
Right.
Which is fine. I'm used to that. That's very similar to how Magic environments are.
Right.
I had one person call me out at a modern GP for not putting a token down when I played Batter Skull. I almost lost the match because of it.
Yeah.
So and that's fine. And I'm used to that. But that's one of the things that happen with standbys, where it's just like, oh, okay, so now we have to have it be prompts. We can't have somebody waiting 30 seconds for their opponent to make a move or something.
Right.
But I had people ask me questions about whether it's instant speed and whether it's if it's from your hand, can be played as a trigger. And we had to make an announcement about stealing priority, or the colloquial term stealing priority. We had to make an announcement at Nationals about it, and even then, I had people asking me like, "Wait, you guys made an announcement about stealing priority? What is that?" I was like, "Oh." So in terms of reflect's not that big of a deal, to be honest, for me, from a judge perspective, other than how it affects the tournament organizer.
Right. Okay.
The things that affect me are more things that are very complicated in their nature, and other ones like it's pretty much, if you just read the Nationals article I wrote, that's like a good quick little list of the most complicated interactions. So it's like stuff like Lancelot too,
right?
And understanding how that attack trigger works, and which is still something that I get questions about all the time.
Right. That changed a little bit as well.
And that changed a little bit too. Yeah, we previously thought it was I mean, the thing is, what you have to consider is that Force of Will and Magic the Gathering rules are very similar on a lot of issues. Regarding to the chase, the trigger system, and the resource system.
Right.
In terms of how you cast things, I should say, not in terms of obviously the land deck is separate, but or the stone deck is separate. But so when you have the CR written almost the same way as Magic on these issues, there tends to be a kind of complacency because there's issues you constantly need to check Italy with to make sure that they're correct. So you get more complacent in the issues that are almost certainly the same as Magic.
Right.
But what we didn't realize is there's no intervening if clause in Magic. So in Force of Will, sorry. So in Magic, you have checks on trigger and on resolution. Whereas in Force of Will, you just have to check on resolution.
Right.
That's
a minor difference, but a huge difference.
Yeah, it really affects it. And the problem is when you also put that out, you have people who misunderstand it. I had multiple calls of people trying to destroy their opponent's blockers with it. Where their opponent would block with something, and then they would push it up to 1,000 to try to kill the blocker.
Right.
And that's something that's really frustrating because you don't ever, as a judge, want to say anything that makes somebody think something that's wrong is correct. That's like the number one rule of what you don't want to do. And because of how complicated the interactions are in Force of Will, it sometimes happens. But as I said, from a reflection refrain standpoint, the grindiness, as I said, it affects the clock, but it doesn't really, in my opinion, it doesn't really affect the judge calls that much because all of it reflects, with one exception, I will say. The one exception is with Morgana.
Oh boy.
That card, I think, is obviously it was printed before. Well, I don't honestly know how they do their card testing and card design.
It was printed
before.
That
it was made before they even knew about Reflect.
Right.
Okay, before they even had Reflect.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so Morgana, I think, is extremely unhealthy with Reflect. Not from a design standpoint, but from a judge standpoint, because I can't tell you how many game losses we had to give.
Jeez.
And people don't like game losses, obviously. And then, who would, right? But in Force of Will, if you draw a card that you are not supposed to draw and cannot isolate it, it is a game loss. It doesn't matter how it happens. So if people get so used to Morgana's bottom decking that things that are supposed to top deck, like Cheshire Cat, they also bottom deck.
Right.
The second you draw a card and shuffle your hand so that you don't know what it is after you've bottom decked off Cheshire, it's an automatic game loss. Because you've drawn a card that you weren't supposed to see
Right.
and can't isolate it, so your opponent has no way of knowing if the card you put back puts you in an advantage.
Right.
Because you're able to like excessively filter your hand.
Right.
It's the same thing that used to happen with Guinevere sacking Root Egg if you didn't shuffle first, or Guinevere sacking Cheshire Cat if you didn't shuffle first. And it's a really unfortunate thing, but it is a force of will rule. And from a judge standpoint, that is the one thing I really hate with Reflect. Because it really makes Reflect, which is fundamentally, even though it makes complicated games, is fundamentally not a complicated card.
Right.
Everything it does is very simple, except for, I guess, the recovery. But the people who don't understand how the recover works, all that means is that they're playing at a disadvantage.
Right. Because
they're playing like, oh, I'll just recover end of turn. And then they recover end of turn on the return. Right? Whereas, like, there's no, like, confusion where they break a rule with that ability, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing, filter normally, there's no point at where they break a rule with that. No point where they break a rule by giving something +2/+2, or bouncing something, or tutoring something, or what's the other effect, countering a normal spell or something like that. There's no point at which they'd break the game to give themselves a game loss. But Morgana really makes it so that we see a lot of that. We give more game losses than I've ever seen in the tournament.
Jeez.
Just because of that, yeah.
And we just said earlier how important not losing a game is right now.
Yeah, exactly. Getting that game loss is really big. I mean, the worst part is winning game 1 and then having 5 minutes left in game 2.
Oh, yeah.
You're obviously not going to finish it.
Yeah.
It's obviously you don't need to even slow play.
Right.
And, you can't slow play, but like, you're not going to finish it in 5 minutes. You're not going to finish a Reflect Mirror in 5 minutes. But if you like get a game loss in like 2 minutes because you bottom deck a card and draw another card and you can't isolate it, all of a sudden you're now looking at a draw when you had almost a guaranteed win.
Right. Basically, yeah.
Or even if it's game 1, guess you're losing.
Yeah.
Right?
You're about to win and now you've lost.
And it's especially frustrating from an Alice's World perspective, because a lot of times when they are doing those Cheshire Cat things, they've already won the game.
Right.
And they're just in the mode of getting out the extra damage, getting in more resources, stuff like that when they've already won. Either if it's the actual Alice's World variant, taking extra turns and stuff, or if it's the, as Chaz puts it, Alice's World list, Alice's World.
Love that.
Just, kind of grinding at your opponent. But if it's getting a game loss is horrible in this current meta.
That's horrible. Yeah, it's definitely the worst thing that can happen. And I can see, like, so there's certain things, like, obviously you got to, like, practice a lot with the card. This has been beaten into everyone's head, I think, at this point, right? I think the interesting perspective is, like, coming from the judge, where your whole thing is, like, look, there's certain interactions that people need to be aware of, like Morgana, where you can get into a lot of trouble. Like, you need to take more care. Those are things that drag on the game, too, because you need to make sure that you're not doing something with Morgana that ends up losing you a game because you messed up, right? So all these things are really important. One of the things that we were talking about before we started recording, which I thought was really interesting, was because you're a judge, and this is, I think, incentive for people to pursue becoming a judge for Force of Will. One, we need them, right? And two, something you were talking about was just finding interactions, right? Because since you know the rules so well that you're able to actually find interactions between cards. Talk a little bit about that, like, because it's something I think that, like you were saying in Providence, it was Mephistopheles with Gravity Bind, right?
Bind of Gravity, yeah.
Bind of Gravity, yeah. Whoops, flip that one.
It's a Yu-Gi-Oh card, so.
Oh, that's probably why, yeah. Oh, my hidden background. So yeah, talk about that a little bit. What do you think, like, being a judge will help you as far as just being a better player?
Well, so when you have an intimate knowledge of the rules, it's very easy when you see a card to say, like, this is how I can break this card because I already know everything that this card will do.
Right.
If you don't, like, if you're just kind of playing off existing rulings and you don't really understand where the rulings come from, you may not really see that kind of advantage behind it. One example I can give is that even before we had the stealing priority, or quote unquote, the colloquial term, stealing priority, we had I had talked to some people about my confusion with standbys because I felt like a standby should be able to interrupt Guiber. And at first, our understanding was that it couldn't, but it ended up being that you could. That you could, because it's cast as a trigger.
Right.
The confusion was the way the CR was worded at the time, where they talked about it's like you cast as a trigger, but then you just play this priority or something, and so people were, like, does that like the thing I was like, it just doesn't make sense. So if it's a trigger, can you respond to the trigger? And I don't understand how you can have a trigger and then not be able to respond to the trigger, even if it's not cast until later or something. And so like we had to like it took a while, and after I became an L1 and was able to have access to the judge program, I was able to discuss this more in detail with Lorenzo and kind of understand exactly how things work. So then that's when we got that in. So
Right.
and obviously that's an extreme case. You're probably not going to find something in a new card that completely breaks the rules completely,
Right.
in a way that people don't
Right.
think about. But you do see certain things. When Reflect came out, the triple tapping, the being able to put a delayed trigger at the end of your turn to untap during their turn, and then having another untap turn from
Right.
their turn. So that you have two recover triggers at the same time and being able to triple rest your Elvish Priest, for example. Like
For feasting, yeah.
Yeah, like if you don't have that intimate knowledge of the rules,
Right.
you may not realize something like that. You may not, because it's also something that never came up, right? There's
Right.
nothing else in the game that besides, there's the Dance of the Shadows, I think it's called, but that's also in TTW. So like before Twilight Wanderer came out, there's nothing that even discussed something like that.
Right.
And so if you are a judge and you do understand like the rules to that degree, you see cards like that and you say, oh hey, I can do this,
right,
this like priority and have this, until the end of my turn, for example, for Dance of the Shadows, for example. And you do have that advantage over a lot of other people, where if they don't understand the rules well enough, they may not understand the interactions that their cards can do. They may not put cards in their deck because they may not realize how influential they are and stuff like that.
Right.
You may not. You may think. You may have an erroneous understanding of a rule, and then have not put cards into your deck as a result of that erroneous understanding. Like people, not putting in Beastly Attack with Lancelot because they don't understand that Beastly Attack does work with Lancelot under the. We were talking about the lack of intervening if clause, but since we have, worked that out with Italy, one of our differences and rulings, Beastly Attack does work with Lancelot. So if you don't include it just because you think it doesn't work, then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Right. Big time.
Exactly, big time. And it may not even be like, even just studying may not really get you there, but when you're doing work and judging, you talk to other judges a lot. And so the shortcomings that you may have, you may be able to fill in with talking to another judge and getting that experience. And is I'm trying to say this in a way that's not conceited, but like, as big as I am in the game, it took me forever to get there. I mean, I've played this game since it came out in March in my store.
Yeah.
So I've played this game since March. I have had like a dedicated interest in learning the rules to an absolute T since March.
Right.
So I've been studying for 10 months and judged Houston regionals and judged nationals, and obviously played at several high level events. I've had a lot to hone things. It's not like I've never made a mistake. It's not like I've never had any shortcomings. So it really helps to have all that experience in terms of just understanding those creative things that you can put into a deck, like Bind of Gravity Mephistophelies. I mean, and that's actually a really good example, because back in the day when Bind of Gravity used to be a lot bigger, a lot of people thought that whoever controlled the resonator that it was on controlled Bind of Gravity's recover effect.
Right.
Whereas obviously it's whoever controls Bind of Gravity. That used to be a really big, and that's kind of lost in the fact that nobody plays Bind of Gravity anymore.
Right.
But like changed. Even in that time, anyone who was a rules advisor at the time, which we now call L0s, anyone who's a rules advisor at the time, uh, would know about, right? Would know how bind of gravity worked, as opposed to, if you're the average player and you're not, interested in the rules, for example. If you're just
Right.
if you're just interested in playing,
Mhm.
you may not necessarily realize stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And I think like, especially, there's a lot of little teams popping up, right? A lot of competitive teams. I feel like if you're a team, you need someone on the team to be a judge. You need that kind of access, like that knowledge, right?
Yeah,
So, one, if you're not on a team, and becoming a judge actually makes you very valuable to the game because you're actually gonna be able to judge events and you'll have that experience. Like I think you gotta suck it up. I know like one of the things that people are a little worried about becoming an L1 judge is that you take the test on Friday. It's like 7
yes.
p.m. right the night before.
Mhm.
Then you got to judge the event the next day, but you don't get to play. Big deal. Like the value that the value you have for being an L1 judge is so big. Even just down to understanding like tournament policy.
Oh yeah.
Like for example, like if you want to do it, like if you want to split a prize in Magic, you need to know a secret language. Like you can't say, "Hey, do you want to split the prize and will you concede and then we'll like split the prize after?" Like if you say that, you get canned, right? You're done. So
Unless you're in the finals, but yeah,
right, yeah, yeah, yeah. So so like stuff like that, like you need to know when what tournament policy is. You have to understand how cards work, why things are doing what they're doing. Like you're saying, why can a uh, an effect stop Guiber. Sorry, standbys, right? Like why
yeah.
does that work? And if you don't understand that at a core level, it's challenging. You'll run into issues there. But if someone does, there's things that come up because I run Team Tavern, so they'll be talking, and there'll be times when like Anton pipes up or Zach pipes in and says, "Well, that doesn't work because of X, Y, and Z." They have a really strong understanding of the rules, right?
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about becoming like starting a competitive team or being involved in one, I think it's just really, really important that you have someone who goes through the L1, and I think you actually do it. Like you don't just learn and then not do the L1 test. Like suck it up. Like you just got to do it. I think, and I think it becomes way more valuable. Also, just part of the process because Stephanie and I were talking about this earlier. Is so you take the test on a Friday. Next day you judge the event, and then there's an interview on Sunday, right?
Yes, that's expected to be the format.
Okay, that's what the expected um, stuff you got to do in order to become an L1 judge. But hey, you're gonna be one of the first 10 L1 judges in the country. Like that, I think that's super cool. I think more people need to do it. I know, like Tavern, we're gonna be promoting the judge program like crazy. Stephanie's is like talking about it all the time. I'm sure like you run out of breath. You say the word judge too much.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so I know I kind of grabbed you like forever here because we ended up talking a lot before. So I don't want to take up much more of your time. Do you have anything you want to talk about? Anything right before let us go? Any shout outs? I know you have a cool store. You guys do a lot of events over there.
What do you mean?
Like you
Sorry.
want like what was the name of your store that because I know you
Oh
guys do like
yeah,
a lot
we
of
I
events and
work for a
stuff.
store called Curio Cavern. It's in Springfield, Virginia. We do events every Saturday at 5:30 p.m. So we have it constructed every. Obviously not this Saturday because both of the gate watch.
Right.
Almost every store is
This is on
got that
lockdown.
and covered
Yeah.
their whole store for the week.
Yeah.
But we but in usually every Saturday that's not a
Right.
Magic pre-release.
Right.
We have at 5:30 we have regular constructed. So I will say that if you go to Richmond, you will see me. I am head judging the event.
Awesome.
So yeah, I do want to put an appeal to people to please become judges. Like I try to do a lot to make sure that the game kind of succeeds in the United States, even without a whole lot of judges. And I understand that there is a lot of requirement in becoming an L1. I know that like if you're traveling to regional, you don't really want to give up your ability to play. We can spare some people if they want to do the circuit series, and if you as long as you judge the regional, you can do the circuit series on the next day. I believe that every regional that's run through ARG, which would be anything that's not California, Las Vegas, or Hawaii,
Right.
in the U.S., would be also have a Sunday ARG. So we can usually spare some judges for that if you want to do the circuit series. But the thing is, without more judges, it's hard for me to see how the game can succeed.
Right.
You know, you look at how many people in Magic are judges per capita with their player base, and we don't even compare. We have 2 judges.
Yeah.
We have a stand-in judge manager. We don't even have an actual judge manager
Right.
yet. And you know, I mean, obviously Rob's great. Like I'm not, saying our stand-in judge manager is not very good, but we have a stand-in judge manager and 2 L1s in Kentober and me. We really need more. We need more for. I know Dallas is probably going to be fine, though I still ask the people, please try to judge Dallas if they can.
Right.
But I don't personally on a personal level. I don't know that I can make every single regional. I'm going to try as hard as I can to make every regional that I am able to judge at.
Right.
In case we need judges, and obviously I'm head judging Richmond, and part of that is because I want to make sure that even if we don't have enough people who pass the judge exam, that we still have a well-run event.
Right.
But I can't do everything myself. Right. So I would hope that we can build up a pretty big judge base, and we are hoping to have an L0 program at some point. Currently, L0s are designated as people who used to be rules advisors who have not become L1s or higher yet in the previous seasons. However, we're hoping to have at some point an L0 exam that would be accessible to people who are not judging regionals for the purposes of judging local events only.
Right.
But we do not have that at the moment. And so the more L1s we can get, the better. And I do appreciate every single person who's taking time out. I know that we have a lot of people. I have a mentor program that I started to help people prepare for the exam. We have a lot of people who've joined for Virginia and Dallas, so it makes me really happy. Yeah. But we just needed to keep strong throughout the entire season if possible.
Yeah, it's super important. I think I urge everyone to give it a shot. I think if you really, really, really like Force of Will, the game is going to thrive with the more judges we have. Take the judge test. Like just do it. Bite the bullet. And I think judging kind of fun, right? Like you get to spend the whole day. You get to see it from the other point of view. Like it's a cool thing. I think it's fun. And, so go out and contact Stephanie too if you want to be a judge. She's all over Facebook. I'll also put her email down here in case you guys don't use Facebook. Stephanie, I appreciate your time. That's it this time. That was pretty easy. I appreciate you coming on with us.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, take care, guys.